For this quilt, we're going to use a jelly roll, our 22.5-inch strips, times the width of fabric. And we're going to use 35 of the strips. Each strip you're going to cut into 6 pieces at 6.5 inches wide. You'll have 6 pieces at 2.5 inches by 6 inches, and you'll have a little piece left over. That's for your scrap. Do that for the 35 strips in this quilt. You'll need 2 yards of background fabric, and from the 2 yards you're going to cut 4 strips at 7.5 inches times the width of fabric, and 4 strips at 6.5 inches times the width of fabric, and 7 strips at 1.5 inches times the width of fabric. From your 6.5 inch strips and your 7.5 inch strips, each of those you're going to cut 140 1-inch strips. So you have 140 1 by 7.5 and 140 1 by 6.5. From each strip in the jelly roll, you'll get 2 blocks. This is one block, this is the second block. And we're going to piece them together with a jelly roll strip, a 6.5 inch strip, jelly roll, 6.5 jelly roll. So do that twice. Once the 2 blocks are stitched together, press toward the jelly roll on both of them. When the blocks are stitched together this way, it should measure 6.5 inches by 7.5 inches. Then you're going to take a 7.5 inch strip and stitch it to each side, and then press toward the strip. When the block is finished, it should measure 7.5 inches by 7.5 inches. Then you'll have 2 finished blocks like this. Do that for all of your 35 jelly roll strips, and you'll have 70 blocks like this. Once you've got all of your blocks sewn together, you're going to piece them into rows, and you're going to alternate the direction of the bars. So these bars are going vertically, these are horizontal, vertical, horizontal, and so on. You're going to piece 7 of these blocks into one row. Then the next row, you're going to alternate the starting blocks. This one started with the vertical, this one will start with the horizontal. So, and then you make a second row of 7 blocks in this orientation. You're going to piece 5 rows starting with vertical and 5 rows starting with horizontal. Then you'll piece them all together into the quilt top. Now you're going to add the inner border, and it's going to outline this part of the quilt. You're going to take your 1.5 inch strips and you're going to piece them together into one long strip. Measure the side of your quilt and cut 2 pieces that length, and then stitch those 2 pieces to the sides of the quilt. Then you'll press those seams, and then you're going to measure the top and bottom of the quilt, cut 2 pieces to that length, sew one to the top and one to the bottom, and then you'll have your inner border finished. Now for the outer border, you can do it 2 ways. You can piece your border, and if you're going to piece your outer border, you'll need 1 yard of border fabric, and cut that into 8 strips at 3.5 inches. And then attach your border the same way you did as your inner border. The way I like to do my borders, my outer borders, is to cut along the lengthwise grain. And for that, you'll need 2.5 yards for the border and the binding. This is folded with the selvages on 2 ends. This is the selvage, and over here is the other selvage. And you can see I folded it up about twice, 2 or 3 times. There's 8 layers of fabric here. So again, you open it up and you put the selvages on either side, and the center crease, you'll press that out because it will be in the way. And this method works for borders. You can cut your borders and your binding out of here at the same time, and it works for borders cut up to 8 inches wide. You can still get, you're going to cut 4 strips for borders and 4 strips for binding. So in this case, we're going to make our borders 3.5 inches cut. And we'll start on this end here. Now to cut this, you're first going to cut off the selvage and toss it. And I'm going to cut 4 strips for the border. And these strips I want to be 3.5 inches wide. Now we have our 4 border strips cut, and we're going to cut our 4 binding strips. So now I have my 4 binding strips and my 4 border strips. And you'll see the rest of the fabric, we have a good 20 inches left. And this is going to be 20 inches times the length that we cut. And the length we cut for this is the 2.5 yards. So you have a lot of long, narrow pieces you can use to piece backings or whatever you want to do with it. Now from this point, what you do is you take your border strips, and first you'll measure the 2 sides and cut 2 of these to the same length and attach to the sides. Then you'll press those open, or press those to the border, and then you'll measure your top and bottom borders, or your top and bottom measurement of your quilt top. You'll cut these 2 to size and stitch 1 to the top and 1 to the bottom, and then you're done with the quilt.